Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're listening to the Locked On Broncos podcast, hosted by Cody Rourke, your daily Broncos podcast.
The Denver Broncos reported over 70 players to phase 2 of the offseason program, and the team announced an executive hire that will change the landscape of women working in professional sports. Plus, we interact with Broncos country for Twitter Tuesday as Broncos fans sent in their questions. On today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Rourke, senior NFL analyst and director of video content at Pro Football Network and Broncos analyst at the Locked On NFL Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody Rourke NFL. Follow the podcast at Locked On Broncos, and make sure you hit that subscribe button here on the YouTube channel to get this podcast in daily video format plus video content all throughout the week. Very excited about that. And also follow the show on your favorite podcast provider, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and our good friends over there at Odyssey. But ladies and gentlemen, today I'm joined by my good friend Patrick Chiotti. You know him very well. You follow him on Twitter at Patrick Chiotti. Engaging in a lot of Broncos conversation. And Patrick, I mean, the continuous narrative that we've seen so far, over 70 players reporting to the team facility for phase 2 of the offseason program. It's great. We're seeing some conversations about Drew Lock's stance in terms of that. It's way too early for all that stuff, man. But how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. You know, it's just good to see the Broncos back on the field, getting those on-field reps. Yeah, that video dropped, and I did say something about Drew's stance, and that seems to kind of be my thing lately. But you know, it is just good to see the guys back out there having fun, hearing Von Miller talk to the guys. I mean, that's something that we haven't seen in over a year, so it's always great to see, and I'm happy that football is almost here.
I know. Me too. Well, and we'll talk about phase 2 of the offseason program a little bit later on the show, but we have some other news we had to get to. The Broncos making an executive decision to hire Kelly Klein as the executive director of football operations, and she'll be the special advisor to general manager George Paton. Now, this is a move that, you know, familiarity, obviously, between George Paton and Klein from the time in Minnesota. Now, a little bit of background. Klein is believed to be the highest-ranking female scouting executive ever with an NFL team. That's a great position to be at for her, but it doesn't come as if this was position that was handed to her. No, she has earned this, and she has made a name for herself in the National Football League, especially with the Minnesota Vikings. She spent the last 10 years with Minnesota and the last 9 in the scouting and personnel department. And general manager Rick Spielman of the Minnesota Vikings had so much praise for her. And this is an easy decision, I think, for George Paton to make. But the ties go back to the time with the Vikings. She will oversee the video department and the equipment department for the Broncos, as well as being involved in all aspects of the personnel department, the day-to-day administrative stuff, NFL draft, free agency, and player evaluation. So this is a really, really awesome experience. And also, you know, for the Broncos to be able to make this type of move, there's some talk that Klein could end up as a general manager in the National Football League in the next 3 to 5 years, potentially. So, Pat, what were your thoughts initially on this? I mean, I don't think we saw this coming, but Klein is essentially going to be the right-hand person to George Paton every single day.
Yeah, this came as a bit of a shock this morning. It was just something that kind of landed on the news feed, but I think that it's a great hire. I think especially bringing in someone who is well-versed in how you run your scouting department and how you do things on a day-to-day basis. I think that this is a great hire. It's a move in the right direction. Obviously, I believe Brittany Bolin is in the building, and she's doing great things with the Denver Broncos organization as well. This is just furthering them, pushing women into leadership roles in the NFL. It sounds like she's gonna have her hands in every department, and, you know, working with the scouting team, working with the video department, working with everything really. So it does kind of sound like she is going to be going into that assistant GM role, maybe even a GM role down the line. I mean, who knows? George Paton's contract is 6 years. She could end up in that role with the Broncos or with another organization down the line. But to me, this sounds like a great hire, just furthering the moves that George Paton is making in his first year as a Denver Broncos GM.
Well, in terms of breaking the glass ceiling as well, I mean, this is a phenomenal insight. I was speaking to a couple of Minnesota Vikings beat reporters, and they said that Klein is super involved. I mean, her knowledge about the game of football and the daily operations from a football admin side are unmatched, and often at times were better than a lot of the men that she was working with. And that's no knock on anybody in the scouting department, but she grinds and she works to the next level to where nobody can outwork her, which is great. And so I'm very excited to see what maybe she can do in her role with the Denver Broncos. I love that you mentioned Brittany Boland. She's obviously in a position to where she can maybe potentially in the near future take over as controlling owner of the Broncos organization. She's done a phenomenal job in her role. Obviously, in the last month, got recently promoted up. So really excited to see the Broncos making some of these trends right now to pushing women in sports, putting them at a position where it elevates them. And obviously, they are very damn good at what they do. So this is a big move for the Broncos organization. Very excited for Klein to see what she's able to do for the organization going forward. Well, Broncos country, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to get into a conversation with you, the listeners of the show, who sent in your questions here on Twitter Tuesday. Both Patrick and myself will take time answering some of the questions that you have. We can't get to every single one, but we're going to get to the ones that we deem best fit. But before we do that, I got to tell you about the sponsors of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there, BetOnline and Built Bar. Starting things off with BetOnline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing, and the NBA playoffs are just getting ready to begin, and you can track all the action at BetOnline. You get all the latest news, odds, and info on all your sporting needs, including the MLB, NBA, NHL, and all your UFC and MMA action. So before the next tip-off, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, bonuses, and confirmation. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus. Promo code Locked On your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And our good friends over there at Built Bar. Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market. Built Bar has 9 delicious flavors, plus the occasional limited time flavor. My personal favorite is double chocolate. They also have raspberry, if you're into that, cherry, coconut, and coconut almond. So there is a flavor for everybody out there, and Built Bar is my go-to because they're also healthy for you. Anytime I'm about to hit a workout, I always have a Built Bar to get me through my workout, give me a little bit of energy. Not to mention, it's a little bit of a delight. It's a little bit of a treat. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, but they're healthy too, containing 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, and 4 grams of sugar. And I want you to get your hands on a box of Built Bar today by going to BuiltBar.com using promo code LOCKED15. That's one word, LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, Patrick, getting into our Twitter Tuesday segment here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, where Broncos fans sent in their questions regarding some storylines surrounding the team. And one of the first questions we got comes from BJ McKinley, and I'm going to tee this one up to you. He says, how do you think it's going to unfold in the cornerback room this year? I have a hard time believing that Patrick Surtain won't be playing significant time right off the bat. What do you think on this? I mean, I've answered this from my own perspective multiple times here on the show, but what is your perspective on this?
I think that it's safe to assume that Surtain's going to be cornerback 1 or even cornerback 2 early on in the season. They brought Kyle Fuller in. He's going to be one of your outside guys. Ronald Darby has those injury concerns, and then Bryce Callahan also has those injury concerns. So I think it's safe to say that Surtain's going to be in that starting role. But I think that this is going to be more of a cornerback guy by committee type of thing, especially when it pertains to certain teams and certain matchups like that. So you think about a team like Kansas City, who has all these weapons. You're probably not going to see a 3 linebacker or even a nickel set. You're going to see more dime sets with more corners on the field so that they can match up. Surtain's one of those guys that maybe you even put him on a guy like Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, someone that he can shut down, use his skills that Vic Fangio loves, and use him in certain situations. I think that we're going to see a mix and match of guys early on, but I do think Surtain's going to see a lot of time, considering he was the 9th overall pick, considering he does have the skill set to play well in this defensive scheme. I think that we're going to see a lot of him early on.
Well, Mike even had a question too here on Twitter Tuesday about could we see him at outside cornerback? Could we see him matching up, covering the big tight ends? I think that's exactly what he's able to do. I had a chance to speak with Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama, last week about Patrick Surtain, and he can absolutely match up with those guys. Now, is Vic Fangio going to put him in that situation? Probably, because here's the thing with Vic, and when I look at a player like Surtain, he's got the traits already to be able to go into a game and match up against those guys. based on his prognosis, where he was drafted, where he was taken. I mean, this is no secret to him too. I mean, this is a very similar system to what Alabama runs. And so the terminology is very different. So I imagine we'll see Vic use him kind of as that Swiss Army knife, but he's got guys on the back end in terms of Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons to help him out. And that's not a bad thing to be able to have guys back there. It allows you to take more chances. You could be a little bit more aggressive underneath when you have a too high safety look over the top, because you know that if you get hands on a guy and you can stick on his hip for even in 1 second, 1.5 seconds, you're going to give your safety time to be able to get over the top, especially if that wide receiver is going to run a vertical route. That way you can play underneath coverage as the corner and your guy's already over the top. So I think we're going to see a lot of different things there. Now, the next one comes from Tim. That's a nice name there. He says, do you think that we can expect to see Michael Ojemudia work in at safety during the offseason with all the added pieces at cornerback? If so, where does he fit behind 31 and 22, considering the safeties that the Broncos added during the NFL draft? And I'll touch on this briefly, and I'll let you follow up on me, Patrick. But I think that if Michael Ojemudia, I think he's going to work a little bit of cornerback and safety this year. Duke Dawson's not ready just yet, coming off of a complete knee reconstruction, ACL, MCL. I mean, the whole 9 yards in terms of that knee. Denver is not going to rush Duke Dawson back. So we can see Michael Ojemudia transition to that role, because Duke Dawson was really designated as a DB, a guy who could play safety, a guy who could play corner. And I imagine we're going to see him learn a little bit about that, because Kareem Jackson is on a 1-year deal. Yes, you have Jamar Johnson and Caden Stearns, but you don't want to throw those guys in defensively. Yeah, you want them to learn. Michael Ojemudia, he's got a little bit of chemistry already with Kareem Jackson in terms of knowing that safety role. So I imagine, as you mentioned, it's going to be a by-a-committee approach. And when you play teams like the Los Angeles Chargers, when you play teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, you're going to have to match your personnel with them, and I think he's going to fit the bill there.
Absolutely. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Ojemudia take snaps at safety or corner, whether it's in nickel or dime sets. I think that he's got the versatility. And that's the biggest thing, too, is guys in this defensive scheme need to be versatile. You need to be able to play inside, outside. You need to be able to play multiple positions. I mean, Duke Dawson was one of those guys, really. He could play cornerback. He could play safety. He could play that Will Parks hybrid linebacker role. So for Ojemudia going into year 2, him already having that chemistry with Kareem Jackson, him kind of knowing the terminology that Kareem Jackson uses and just picking up little tips from him, I think that it's safe to say that he probably will be that safety behind Jackson, but also as that cornerback 4 or 5, somewhere in that range, just the guy that they throw in for rotational purposes. But it wouldn't surprise me at all past this year to see Ojemudia step into that starting role once Kareem Jackson goes, if he doesn't re-sign with the Denver Broncos.
I like it. And then Chase Wilner's up next. He says, will Lloyd Cushingberry hold his starting role? I mean, I've shared my thoughts on this, but I haven't gotten your perspective on this, Pat. I think that Cush is going to be the starter. I don't think that Denver drafted Quinn Miners to replace him. I think Miners is a depth option for them. So that's my stance on it.
Man, I really think that Cush is going to take that job, but boy, it's hard not to love Quinn Miners. But the biggest thing that I was thinking about this today was, what's the future hold for the right guard position? You know, Graham Glasgow has a potential out next year. You still have Netani Mutis waiting in the wings, although his injury concerns from the past could creep up. But Quinn Miners could be an option there too. So you never know. But I do like the fact that they're having this camp battle. I know Cushingberry had his struggles last season. He was a rookie. We understand that. But it is good to have those backup options. You can never have enough quality offensive linemen, especially with the injury history that we've had with this group. So I think it's good. But all in all, I do think Cushingberry is going to be that starting center in week 1.
A couple rapid fire ones here, just so we could get to everybody. Brennan B. Rocco 1991 says, can Von Miller return to Pro Bowl form? Quick thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This guy, he said it himself. He's a Ferrari, man. It's hard to stop a Ferrari. Minor speed bump. He had a broken axle last season. It's all fixed. I think that he returns to form, and I think he's better than ever, man. This coverage team is going to be great, and we all know what happened the last time that he had a great coverage team behind him.
That's going to be fun to watch. I think that Von absolutely can return to Pro Bowl form. I mean, could he get off to a little bit of a slow start? I mean, yeah, when you haven't played football in over a year and a half, I mean, it's easy to say you might expect him to get off to a slow start. But then again, it's Von Miller. We don't know what we're going to get. But if he stays healthy, I think that opposing offensive coordinators are a little bit looking at that outside linebacker duo between Chubb and Von, and they're kind of scratching their head as to, hey, how can we counteract these guys? And usually we see it with a quick passing game, but The Broncos secondary right now, as you mentioned, looks really strong. The next one comes in from Timothy is, GOAT, does Noah Fant break out this year? And does Alberto Cuevanov become a more critical part of the offense? I'll answer the Noah Fant one. I think that Noah Fant will have a big season this year. I think that he's finally poised. And the issue that we talked about is the Broncos had to find a way to utilize him for an entire game, not just one half, right? Not just the first half and then go away from him in the second half. Find a way to use him in mismatch scenarios. I mean, I talk about outside matchups with one-on-one against smaller corners. We saw that against Kansas City in that Sunday Night Football matchup, and I'm surprised they never didn't go back to that even more. But Noah Fant started to really pick things up towards the end of last season. He also, had a great start to the season, but it was only in a half, the first half, the second half, and really nothing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then he got that ankle injury against the New York Jets in week 4. But what about Alberto Cuevanov? He's not going to be fully ready in terms of full speed contact just for training camp just yet. He's got a little bit of ways to go. What do you think about him? Can he become a more critical part of the offense?
I do think so. I think that we kind of saw it at times last year when they were using him, especially in the New England game. I mean, we saw Drew Lock targeting him early and often, and I think that that's kind of what we're going to get. You use those two tight ends, Noah Fant, Alberto Cuevanov. I mean, that's a serious threat. I really want to see how he comes back. I mean, they moved on from Nick Van Nett. They didn't bring Jake Butt back, so I think that is a clear sign that they are moving forward with him as that second tight end. Andrew Beck is still there, and they have a couple other guys that they're going to use as camp bodies, but I do think that Alberto is going to be one of those big guys in this offense, especially if Noah Fant does break out and he does turn into one of those big tight ends in this league. That's just going to open up more stuff for Alberto. Plus all these weapons that are surrounding him, they can all be decoys, especially in the red zone where we know Drew Lock likes to go to Alberto.
We'll see if the Broncos quarterback play can improve this upcoming season. Right now, a lot of question marks and a lot of fans, too, are just skeptical that Drew Lock can do it. I certainly understand that, but don't discount that he may or may not be able to do it. We don't know yet. That's why we're going to have a competition at training camp that we're going to be observing up close and personal. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. We're actually going to be talking about practice. Yes, practice. The Broncos, they got back to the football field in phase 2 of the offseason program. We'll get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do it, I got to tell you about the other sponsor of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there, rockauto.com. And ladies and gentlemen, if you need any type of part for your vehicle, whether you're renovating something in your garage or something goes wrong with your vehicle and you need a new part, rockauto.com is always the reliable place to go. And they have the lowest prices out there, folks. And rockauto.com is a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. And they have everything from engine control modules, brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, you get everything that you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your doorstep. The rockauto.com catalog is also unique and remarkably easy to navigate. When you go to rockauto.com, you can quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle based on year, make, model. You get to choose the brands, specifications, and even the prices that you prefer. And best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and they're the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On Broncos in there. How did you hear about his box, so that they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. rockauto.com. But Patrick, now getting into the fourth quarter action of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, I want to tell Broncos fans, after they're done listening to this show, head over to your favorite podcast provider and search for the Peacock and Williamson Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. NFL analyst Brian Peacock and longtime NFL scout Matt Williamson, they bring you the daily national perspective around the National Football League. Be sure to check it out, the Peacock and Williamson Show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But Patrick, Broncos players were back on the field yesterday for phase 2 of the offseason program, and it was exciting to see players like Von Miller coming back, Drew Lock, Cortland Sutton with his knee brace, working with Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, just seeing everybody back on the field. I mean, players were excited. You could tell the demeanor was there. It was business. But, obviously no helmet, no shoulder pads just yet. We're going to have to wait a little bit until that happens. Obviously, the mandatory minicamp will be coming up at some point. But 17 players, according to Nine News reporter Mike Kliss, were not there. About 14 to 17 players. One of those players, Justin Simmons, not sure why. Obviously one of the Broncos union reps there. Kicker Brandon McManus not there as well. Malik Reed, one of the alternate union reps, was at practice. And Teddy Bridgewater missed due to personal matters, but he's expected back this week. what were your initial thoughts just seeing players back on the field? I mean, we saw the video on social media of Cortland Sutton dapping up Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick. You could just tell that those guys were all excited to be back because business mode. It's time to lock in and the season ahead of them. Broncos players, especially players I've spoken to, they're excited and they really want to change a lot of people's mindset on them this upcoming season. They want to prove a lot of people wrong.
This is a big time for the Denver Broncos football team. You have a new GM who talked about installing a new culture into this locker room. You have all these veterans here, Justin Simmons, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb now, and now you have Cortland Sutton coming back. That was probably my favorite thing to see from all the videos that they put out was Cortland Sutton back, smiling, knee brace on, yeah, but dapping up Tim Patrick, dapping up Jerry Jeudy. Seeing him just be back in his element. I mean, this is what guys have been waiting for. It seems like it's a bit of a normalcy being back with all of their teammates. It's fantastic, man. Getting those on-field reps is so valuable, even if it's just 7-on-7, even if it's just 1-on-1s, even if it's just playing catch, going through the routes, going through the motions. These are so crucial for these guys, and it's definitely something that I think a lot of these guys missed last season. This is something that's very important to them. It's great to have them back on the field. It's what they love to do. And you know what? It was great seeing Quinn Miners with the halter top jersey. You got to love it. Let the belly breathe, baby. Let it breathe.
Well, that's the lineman mantra too. I mean, for the linemen, the big guys, you got to normalize them, having their guts out. I mean, that's how it's always been. I mean, back when I played, and that was a long time ago. But it's good to see Broncos players back on the field. Like you mentioned, they didn't get this last year. We didn't get this last year. We didn't get to see them at practice. We didn't get to see them going through things. Now, I want to provide some clarification too. A lot of fans have talked about how come, there's not any footage of them going against each other. Well, in phase 2, there is no 11-on-11. Really what it's happened to, it's broken up into 2 segments. So the offensive players, they get their time on the field first, and then the defensive players get to come out and they get their time. So you're not congesting 70 players all in one confined area, obviously still due to COVID restrictions. Things are opening up, though, statewide in Colorado, which is a great sign in terms of fans being able to be in full attendance this upcoming season at Empower Field at Mile High. They're going to have to wait till week 3 in order for that to happen. But, one step closer to Broncos football, Patrick. Like you said, great to see Von Miller back. He was leading. He says, let's get to work. Now, what the team does right now, this is chemistry building. This is going through the playbook, sharpening up things, going through your positional drills at a teaching pace. So it's nothing too fast, too physical. So the intensity should be ramped down a little bit, but 70 players so far reported. We'll see if any more gets added to the mix. We'll see if Teddy Bridgewater makes his return tomorrow. We'll see as well about Justin Simmons and even Brandon McManus. No insight really as to why outside of Teddy Bridgewater personal reasons, but not really a big deal at this point because it's still part of the voluntary portion of the offseason. So we'll continue to see if Broncos players report, obviously due to the optics of the NFLPA's ongoing dispute with one another. Many players are unhappy right now with the PA's handling of the optics of the injuries to Deshaun Hamilton and Jawan James, unfortunately, 2 Broncos players. James no longer a Denver Bronco. Deshaun Hamilton still, he's on the non-football injury list. We'll see if they put him on IR, if they keep him around so he can rehab. Something we talked about in yesterday's episode of the show. But the Broncos, they have a lot of opportunity in front of them. Plus, tomorrow's episode of the show, folks, we're going to get into one of the Broncos' newest signings from the tryouts this past weekend at rookie minicamp. We'll talk about him a little bit more in depth. I was able to break the story on the Broncos signing him, so I'll give you a little bit more clarity as to who the Broncos are getting, and could he potentially be that 4th outside linebacker in the edge rusher rotation. We'll break it down all on tomorrow's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Speaking for my good friend Patrick Keote, I'm Cody Rourke, host of the show. We'll see you tomorrow. And don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel, like and comment, and follow on your favorite podcast provider, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the Odyssey app.